Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And this week I thought it was time for us to think about ourselves to a certain extent as HR professionals and what we can do for us, and how we can also apply that thinking more broadly to our organisations. And I was really pleased to notice an old neighbour of myself, Katherine Horstmann of Katherine Horstmann Nutrition, who's ex-HR, is an expert in this area. So I persuaded her to come on the podcast to talk a little bit about this. So Katherine, obviously I know you as somebody who used to live in the same village as me, but would you like to explain your HR background and then also what brought you to become a registered nutritionist?
Yes, of course. And thank you for inviting me on your podcast, Lucinda. I have 17 years background in corporate HR, everything from engineering to property, finance management, engineering, software. So most latterly, I was HR business partner for a large insurance corporate, doing a generalist role, so very much partnering with the managers. And my previous role was in talent management. So prior to that, I did a sociology degree. I always wanted to do something very much people focused. So I then decided, when I started having children, that sort of corporate life didn't quite, and the long hours didn't really work for me with motherhood, which made me go off onto a different career track.
And so you went off and retrained then basically as a nutritionist?
That's right. Yeah, I remember pureeing some organic vegetables for my firstborn when I was weaning him, whilst popping an M&S plastic tub in the microwave and thinking, I don't know if I'm being a great role model here. And I felt, a real burning desire to do my best by the children and nourish them in the best way I could, look after their health. So I went back to college and 3 years of blood, sweat and tears during actually sort of tail end of lockdown, and got my diploma in nutritional therapy at the College of Naturopathic Medicine in London.
I mean, it's a topic I've become more and more interested in. I'm sure many of us who've had children can identify with that. Well, certainly for the firstborn, the second and third maybe less so, in terms of being quite so purist about the purines that they get. But in terms of that sort of putting ourselves second, and I was saying to you off camera, wasn't I, how whenever we do episodes for HR, and I just saw something today about the CIPD and HR director about, we are terrible as a profession to put ourselves second. I don't know, maybe predominantly a female profession, but if we don't nourish, it's this whole thing, should we nourish ourselves and look after ourselves in order to be able to support others effectively, and to make sure that from a point of view of health and well-being, one of the things that personally I've become more aware of, I think since COVID, I've always been quite interested in it, is the impact of our diet. I mean, there's all this stuff about not just what we eat, it's the impact on our biome and vitamin D and all these sort of things can affect our mood. And there's a real swing now also in terms of organisations wanting to be much more supportive of people's well-being. So it seems a bit strange that we wouldn't consider this to be something of importance to support people with. I mean, is this something that you might see or you'd recommend, or what's your position on this, from putting your old hat on if you're in an internal HR role, as to whether this is something relevant for HR to think about?
Yeah, I think it's actually I think the conversation needs to be more why we wouldn't have this on the HR agenda, really. And I think this has occurred to me much more now I'm not in HR anymore. But it's just, I mean, the evidence now for the link between what we eat and our susceptibility for sort of longer term chronic health problems is quite compelling. And also that huge gut-brain axis, which is my area of specialism in my nutrition clinic now, helping women with their mental health. This link between the food we eat and our mood is compelling. This wonderful Smiles trial, I think it was about 8 years ago, really showing the link between that lovely Mediterranean style diet and the improvement of mood. There's lots of evidence there.
So do you want to I mean, I'm as I said, I'm quite familiar with this because I've been reading up quite a lot about it recently in the Dr. Tim Spector type stuff. But I'm not sure that everybody is. In fact, my kids, they all know that they've got to have certain things in order to support their biome, which they go. So do you think any of your friends have ever heard of a biome? And they're like, definitely not. They think you're a bit mental. But I mean, why don't you share some of your expertise in this area? Because it might be of interest to people. And I mean, we're recording this in February, and actually there's been that terrible, sad news about that lady, Nicola Bulley, who the whole thing about our well-being and being aware of our mood, it shouldn't be ignored, should it? So what tips have you got from a nutrition point of view?
So in terms of, and that's where it started for me, really, with my own personal journey with my own mental health issues at a very tender age, actually. So I feel very passionately about this area. I think, in my field, we talk about the standard Western diet. So very much ultra processed foods, which a recent study has said that actually 60% of children's diet consists of these kind of ultra processed foods. So coming away from that, making sure that we're fully hydrated and we're avoiding too much sugar and certainly sweeteners. That's a conversation that doesn't happen enough. The impact of that is more problematic. Making sure that we have that diversity of multicolored fruit and vegetables every day, at least 5 portions at a minimum. And that lovely saying that, don't buy a packet with ingredients on it that your grandma would go, what is that, dear? I've never heard of that. And sort of anything with more than 4 or 5 ingredients. So really will help with the diversity of the microbiome. And like I said, that will have a huge impact on mood. But I think basically, in our sort of modern medicine framework, we focus very much on a diagnosis and we focus very much on managing symptoms. So my training is with a functional medicine lens, which looks at the root cause. We have to get to the root cause. There's no point prescribing an antidepressant if we have an underactive thyroid, because it's the thyroid that needs the support.
So there's things there in terms of you would, if someone has got a specific mood disorder otherwise, and you're looking to support them nutritionally, you diagnose it to find out what potential cause was. So some of it might be medical, but some of it could be supported by diet. If I'm just somebody who, I think it's interesting with people who haven't had to go back to the office, for argument's sake, because my brain goes in 2 ways when you think about nutrition in the form of supporting people at work. Really, rubbish food and vending machines. You talked about sweeteners and how can you make things available? Cakes in the office. What was a person moaning about that recently? Or fruit in the office. And there's pros and cons there. But actually, many of us are now working remotely. And in theory, it should be easy to stay hydrated and to eat well, in theory, I guess. But often people don't move from their desks, or it takes that extra bit of brain capacity or otherwise. Have you got any sort of hacks or top tips, those people who are feeling that they are glued to their desk and they only get up to go and pick up from the school run or otherwise, how can they easily nourish themselves, I guess, and their family?
Yeah, I mean, At the desk, I really recommend smoothies. I recommend the Nutri Ninja or a Nutri Bullet, and it's a very easy thing to do quickly in the morning before jumping in your car or jumping on a train. And it just makes sure that we can get, at least 1 or 2 portions of vegetables in it. So the main one that I usually recommend is water or coconut water with half an avocado. So you've got those lovely healthy fats, and it makes it creamy and you really don't taste it. And then a handful of berries as well, and half a banana for a bit more sweetness. And if people are having some protein powder, they might like to put a scoop of that in, and they might add their vitamins to that as well, or perhaps some medication if it's in powder form. So I think smoothies are a really good way to still get nutrition at work. You're right, regular hydration is essential for productivity and concentration. I like the idea of setting an alarm every hour to get up from my desk, whether I'm at home or whether you're in the office. And just, it makes you have that movement break. You might have some kind of nice chat with a colleague, and it means you're topped up, because we should be aiming for about 2 to 2.5 litres of ideally filtered water a day.
Okay, so there's a few things there which are really useful. So I like your concept of the smoothie, something you can start the day with. You mentioned you might put a protein powder in it, and again, that's something that I think does it make it more full. What's the benefit? Do you recommend protein powders? Because sometimes it's just attached to the concept of weightlifters or things. Is that something that you recommend more broadly to the family?
Yeah, actually, I think it's become one of these new sort of fads, if you like. And I don't think I have many friends that aren't having a protein powder every morning. But actually, there aren't too many of us that are really deficient in protein. So it very much depends on the client I'm working with. If I can see very clearly that they're not having enough protein in their diet, then I might recommend that as more of a temporary measure. I don't see that as something that someone needs to have every day. Eggs are the most brilliant form of protein with all the complement of amino acids. So I'd say food first, really, but yeah. I might use a scoop once or twice a week in a smoothie, or perhaps some protein pancakes or something like that.
And I've got a teenage son, actually, and I think that when they're hungry, sometimes not going to snack on sugar. Have you got an issue with them having something like that, with a smoothie with protein that makes them fuller? Does it mean that if they've not had an avocado in it, which would make it less likely to sort of bounce, if they're just going to have a pure sort of sugary fruit smoothie, would that make it better for them?
So with protein powder in children, it very much depends on the age. It just needs to be a bit of caution applied, just because with smaller children, the kidneys are not fully developed. So actually, they shouldn't really be having things like protein powder on a regular basis. With older children, so for example, my eldest is 13 in a couple of weeks. He will have it, a couple of times a week. It wouldn't be something I would be recommending for him every day. Protein is indeed really important for satiety, i.e. making us feel fuller for longer. So things like slower release carbohydrates are fabulous for this age group. So for example, starting the day with some porridge or some eggs, some nuts and seeds maybe ground up on the porridge, maybe some frozen berries is fabulous if we can persuade them to eat that.
Absolutely. My son's nearly 17, so he's fine with that, but it's just interesting. I think that they're at the stage where they want to eat permanently, so thinking that satiety, as you say, is eating things other than toast and Nutella is a helpful change.
And indeed, if they are eating toast and Nutella, we do what we can as parents, so making sure it's wholemeal bread. Moon on a stick would be organic, and there's a kind of more healthy Nutella version with hazelnuts. So I'm a pragmatist.
That'll probably be rejected, I'm quite sure, but you never know. So going back to our sort of work piece, if you were going back into the office and you had got your strategic HR hat on and you were trying to influence people's well-being or support people's well-being through nutrition at work, what sort of things would you consider would be useful, or you'd be recommending, or have you in fact seen and heard about?
Well, I think, I think the case for health is becoming increasingly compelling, and the last few years has given us a real stark, brutal reminder of that, actually. And I think in order for people to focus on their health, they really need to understand what's in it for them and the consequences of not doing so. So one of the first questions that I will ask my clients is, what is this health issue that you've come to me with? What's it stopping you doing? Is it dancing? Is it socializing, running? Is it dating? So for example, obesity, take that as an example. That will stop people being as physically active as they'd like because of that pressure on the joints from the extra weight, and that can impact their confidence. Then they can't, it impacts their relationships. So I think then helping them with gentle awareness of the consequences of that really helps. There's a multitude of health issues associated with extra weight, cardiovascular, for example, and diabetes, the list goes on. But empowering people to know how to help themselves rather than telling them, this is what you will do. So I'm a huge advocate of small, sustainable changes and not quick, faddy diets. So, January is maddening for nutritional therapists. So a lot of my job is undoing the education that we've had, which is, fat makes you fat. Don't have an avocado, it's got too many calories. Make sure you count your calories. And that's what good health is about, which it just simply isn't.
So small sustainable changes, if you were sort of supporting people and I guess nudging that sort of thing, would that be the example of the fruit basket at work? I mean, I do question whether they ever worked, actually, whether people actually want to eat out of a fruit basket at work. But what would you suggest in that workplace? I mean, we've talked about at home, having your water on your desk, setting your alarm, doing smoothies in the morning, that sort of thing. What sort of things are there that you could do at work or suggest at work to support people?
Yeah, funnily enough, I used to work in an organisation where they had fruit delivery baskets a few times a week. And I think, at least having that availability of something that's not the cakes, flapjacks, biscuits is great. I think, we need to go further than the health screening service that some employers provide. And I think a lot of organizations are introducing things more and more and doing it well. So having a mobile masseuse visit once a week used to happen in one of the organizations I worked in, which was just, the highlight of our week. Things like, I know my husband has no meetings Wednesdays and Wellbeing days where, they can just take a certain number of days off a year when they just don't feel like working. And obviously, I think the PMI, the private medical schemes that organizations have, there's so much scope to help our employees through that via, osteopathy, acupuncture, more complementary therapies that are really helpful.
So really having a decent benefits and sort of slightly wider, broader benefits available to people.
That's absolutely right. So, for example, some organizations will offer access to a financial planner. And, for me, it's not just about nutrition and avocados. It's about holistic mind, body and soul approach to feeling well. And for some people, a lot of people are in financial dire straits right now. That might be the thing driving their stress. So, rather than the taking a pill for every ill approach, whether that's medication or supplemental, it's getting to the root drivers of that stress. And for many people, they might need some assistance with managing a budget or cooking on a budget, shopping on a budget, things like that.
I mean, that's actually quite an interesting angle, isn't it? Especially aligning again back to the nutrition piece, because there is an argument that the cheap, processed stuff, I think about how cheap chocolate is compared to when I was 70s and 80s, relatively, and actually many people would say that they can't necessarily afford to eat healthily. Now, I know certainly you can get, going back to your point about a smoothie, you can get frozen fruit and veg, so that's a great way to start, I'm imagining, if you get frozen stuff from wherever. Any other top tips for people thinking about nutrition on a budget? And I guess, again, this might be where they're taking their lunch to work rather than buying from the canteen if you're feeling a bit hard up.
Yeah, well, for managing a budget, I think there's lots of different things that can really help. Menu planning is, really king in my opinion. It also helps that switch between workplaces, office and home. So just investing 20 to 30 minutes tops a week to sit down and decide what you're going to have, especially as a family, really makes a difference. It cuts down on waste. You'll spend less money. You'll feel more in control. So I think my main tips would be, one, cooking the meal planning. Two, cooking once, eating twice, I always say. So the dinner I make tonight, I will be making enough for my lunch tomorrow, while, in between working from home, for example. You could take that into the office. Three, batch cooking is really important. So, it's easy, isn't it, when you're doing a vegetable chili or a bolognese or something, to make 3-4 times the amount, freeze that in individual portions. That really helps as well. And then, for the days that time doesn't permit and you just have too many other commitments, working out, where are my most healthy places near the office, or having maybe a few things in the freezer at home. And there's 2 particular brands that I really recommend, and that's Cook, who freeze their delicious food as soon as it's made. There's no added preservatives, additives, sugars, salts, which you tend to get in the more mainstream takeaway market. So Cook and Mindful Chef are both lovely, and they do frozen ranges. So being pragmatic, we can't aim for perfection all the time. So having that night where, you get home late and you just need to heat something up. And slow cookers are also absolutely amazing, especially for cooking on a budget. You can get a fairly inexpensive cut of meat and add whatever's lurking in the bottom of your fridge, and it will generally come out really deliciously.
Yeah, that's reminded me, we've got a soup maker which I've found has been quite good for like lunches, working from home and stuff like that, where you can chuck loads of things in, including a bit of fresh ginger, fresh turmeric and stuff like that, so you feel like you get, being extra sort of virtuous, and have that made and ready for lunchtime too. That's something, and I guess you could take that into the office. If I was going to the office, that's something that we've found has been quite a good way of making things and using up manky carrots at the bottom of the fridge.
Definitely. And actually adding a few handfuls of red lentils or some beans to your soup can really up that protein content again, to make you feel fuller. People say, oh, well, I've had soup and I'm still hungry, but when I hear the ingredients, I can see why. Yeah. So adding those protein sources in, and actually what I do every week, we are a big family of 5, is we have a chicken every Sunday, and then I will boil the carcass. So we've got a stock for the Monday, and then I'll make a soup for the Tuesday. So that's a really nice way of doing, a couple of meals at least on a budget.
And kind of doing things that's going back to what people used to do, isn't it? Keeping it simple in terms of those things.
So definitely. Sorry, Lucinda. I was just going to say, and actually, to boil the chicken bones is a fabulous rich source of an amino acid called glycine, which is really good for our microbiome. So there's another benefit there.
And no waste and all that sort of thing as well. So I guess that those are some really nice tips. I think we've talked about a little bit about what we can do in the office, a little bit about what we can do personally, a little bit how we can think about the whole person in terms of well-being and what might be causing something, whether it's physical or mental or financial or other stresses, but how it ultimately all loops round into this sort of piece. Is there anything else, I suppose, if you were recommending someone to take supplements? I don't know if you do as a nutritionist. Is it about actually getting it all through diet? Are there any other tips that you think that someone who isn't feeling on top part of that you'd recommend that they can do over above the diet, exercise, or diagnosing it? What other things have we not covered?
Yeah, I mean, I do often use supplements as part of my recommended plan when I work with my clients one-to-one. I try to keep it under about 4 at the most, because anything that we swallow, our liver has to process, whether it's a supplement or a medication. So, and actually it's a very personalized thing. So I will kind of get an idea of whether someone is getting the right level of healthy fats in their diet, those kind of macronutrients like protein, and the micronutrients, things like vitamin C and your B vitamins, very important for energy. I think what people need at different life stages is very different as well. So for example, menopause is a very topical subject. I think it's one that really has to be on the HR agenda, because the symptoms from menopause for many women can be quite crippling. And actually, we don't just want our employees to turn up to work, do we? We want them to be productive.
Yeah.
So, things like hot flushes and migraines and so on can really, really get in the way of that. So it's helping a woman to become more metabolically flexible in the menopause, being able to deal with burning fats as well as glucose as an energy source for the body.
So thinking of sort of specific things where you might recommend to people what they might help, or signpost them in that direction as to what would help in that sort of area.
For the menopause specifically?
Yeah, or anything particularly where you might say, what would you, are there any sort of go-to, like you say, you mentioned migraine and menopause, would there be go-to supplements that you'd suggest in those circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, I think so many of us in our modern diets are often deficient in magnesium. Magnesium is really quite wonderful. It's known as nature's tranquilizer. So if we are having muscular aching, magnesium is super helpful. If we have low mood, magnesium is super helpful. It helps with manufacturing one of our neurotransmitters, which helps with our mood. So that's why it's important to keep our deep dark green leafy vegetables in our diet, but also we don't just have to swallow magnesium. A really lovely way of getting it is throwing a good 4 or 5 generous cupfuls of Epsom bath salts into the bath, because it contains a form of magnesium called magnesium sulfate, which is easily absorbed through the skin. And the benefit of that is, if someone has gut health issues, they might not easily be able to absorb it in the small intestine. So actually, you're maximizing the ability for the body to take that in by throwing it in the bath. Or if you don't like baths, putting it in a bucket and having a little foot soak at the end of the day is a nice, easy way.
Could be a good way to make you feel cheer you up or relax you, I guess, as well, that sort of thing, isn't it, in terms of magnesium?
Exactly. You can also get sprays and creams as well.
And I think it's tranquilizer. It helps with sleep, doesn't it? Some people who have middle of the night waking type things, which again can happen certain times of life or stress or otherwise like that. So that's an interesting one. Just one final point I thought, which we haven't touched on, thinking about it. Now, obviously, you're not vegetarian, I'm guessing, or vegan, because you have a chicken every Sunday. But what about that? There's quite a lot of people moving to a plant-based eating. Cutting out meat. Obviously, you've got amino acids in meat, which so what's your position there in terms of meat or not meat?
So if a client came to me and said, it's up to you, Katherine, which should I be, then my honest position on that would be, it's better to have some meat. It's easier for us to get all the nutrients that we need in our diet. So, for example, iron deficiency is exceptionally common, very common, and it doesn't have to be anemia stage, just a general deficiency in iron. And it's much easier for the body to extract the iron from heme sources, heme iron from animal sources, than it is from non-animal sources. So things like that are easier for us to access in animal products. I think eggs are exceptionally important because they're such a rich source of protein. I think my vegetarian and vegan clients just have to work a lot harder to get everything they need. So healthy fats, incredibly important. Fat doesn't make us fat. Fat is the building block of our hormones. It's critical for our mood. So if we're not having those smash fish, as we call it in my world, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, herring, if we're not having those, we need to be maximizing our intake of things like nuts and seeds and flaxseed, extra virgin olive oil, things like that in a vegan vegetarian diet.
So you've got to work hard to get those things and to look after this, get that overall nutrition. And the interesting point, again, just looping back to, you sort of said fat doesn't make you fat. So what is it that makes people fat then?
Well, mainly sort of disordered blood sugars. So, fat has been demonized over the time, and obviously there's different forms of fats. So what we want to do is we want to avoid the more saturated fats. So the fish and chip shop stuff, the pork crackling, it's delicious once in a while.
Every day, not.
But yes, just limiting our sources of saturated fats and having the more healthy fats. And our body needs that to manufacture our cholesterol, and we do need some cholesterol. It's just a problem when it's too high. But blood sugars is the main thing, really, Lucinda, because it causes something called insulin resistance. So our pancreas keeps pumping out this hormone insulin, and the cells become resistant to letting in the glucose into the cell. And then we have phenomenons like sort of chronic fatigue syndrome presentation. We have a lot of people suffering with long COVID. So it's all about going back to the health of the cell and what the cell needs to thrive.
So sorry, what was the cause? So would you see those links? And what was the cause of when you say disordered blood sugar? So is that caused by carbohydrate, short-term carbohydrate, or eating in a strange way? What do we know what causes that?
So what causes insulin resistance?
Yeah,
it's just our body gets an onslaught of sugars all the time, really. And I know I have to work exceptionally hard with my 12-year-old. Who walks past a shop every day. And I was absolutely dismayed to see him bring home a little tub with a skull and crossbones on it called toxic waste. I mean, I have no words for that.
Yeah.
But, a little bit of sugar in our coffee, is it going to kill us? No, it's not. But we have sugar regularly at many intervals during the day. So with a lot of my clients, we're considering things like intermittent fasting. So just stopping eating by 7 in the evening and not eating again until 8 o'clock the next morning gives our body this wonderful break to let all the repair and restoration happen to the body. We need to replenish our enzymes, our digestive enzymes. We need things like optimal stomach acid to break down our food and extract the vitamins from the foods we eat. So, we don't give our body a break. We snack. And I think, blood sugar management is the most important foundational thing that every nutritionist will do.
Okay, so things that we can look, lots of food for thought there. See what I did there. Okay. So Katherine, I think we've covered quite a lot of things. Obviously, it's, as we sort of start out, it's lots of stuff that we can apply personally, but it's also stuff that we could support others with. And you talked about broader benefits for people. Haven't talked about whether you can influence what's on the canteen list, but I dare say you never know, you can influence those sort of things as to are there healthy options and stuff like that, getting rid of hidden sugars. And I suppose that almost loops around. We started with processed food, didn't we, and avoiding that. And I think that's one of the issues with processed food is it's got lots of hidden sugar as well, isn't it? So that might all play into it. So there's lots of things that we can do. You talked about whether we can supplement or otherwise, the challenges of not being too purist with our kids, because they will bring home disgusting sugary sweets. So balancing it out with those things. I remember toxic waste. So it's really, I suppose, more than anything, it's making sure that we are looking after ourselves and leading by example, because how on earth are we supposed to be productive in our roles or support others without those, and being a little bit alert to them, I guess. Often people come to HR, don't they, and ask, how can you help me? And it might be that if we've got our radar on this, talking about sleep problems or other things, you can signpost people to nutritional guidance that might support them in some way. If it to come to you for extra guidance or any resources, I know you do some nice recipe things. I think you do them on Instagram and stuff, don't you? How would they find you, Katherine?
Yeah, so my website is www.katherinehorstmann.com. And I'm also on Instagram as Katherine Horstmann Nutrition, and Facebook as well. And I work one-to-one with clients, and I also work in corporate settings. So, for example, doing talks, workshops, providing resources on everything from healthy snacks at work to eating on a budget, the stress management. That's another really key thing that we haven't touched on, but actually I don't think we've probably done enough to acknowledge the huge freight train that hit us all in the last few years, and the resulting mental health problems that have been brought about by that, which we need to be part of the solution, I think, helping people get that dopamine hit and feeling a bit better and finding more constructive ways to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the HR Uprising podcast. Really lovely to speak to you.
Pleasure.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now, you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.